When you're shopping for a laptop that can handle serious gaming, you quickly learn that the cheap gaming-ready notebooks you see on clearance often end up feeling like paperweights once the first demanding title hits the screen. I've spent the last few weeks testing a handful of budget-oriented machines, and the disappointment rate is surprisingly high. Overheating, stuttering, or the dreaded battery died after 10 minutes of play scenario pops up more often than you'd think. That's why the first question I asked myself when the HP 15.6-inch FHD Touchscreen business laptop landed on my desk was simple: does this feel like a smarter buy, or am I just swapping one set of compromises for another? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The HP isn't marketed as a hardcore gaming rig. It's labeled a business laptop with a touchscreen, but the specs 13th Gen Intel i7-1355U, 32 GB of RAM, and a full terabyte SSD promise enough horsepower to run modern games at decent settings. My hesitation came from the processor choice. The 1355U is a low-power useries chip, tuned for efficiency rather than pure performance, so I wondered whether it could sustain the kind of sustained loads you see in titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Elden Ring. In contrast, a desktop-class i7 or N-series laptop CPU would give you more headroom, but those options also bring higher heat and shorter battery life. The real test, then, was whether HP's balance of power, thermals, and portability actually works for the kind of gamer who still wants to hop on a coffee shop Wi-Fi after a session. First off, the display. The 15.6-inch Full HD touchscreen is bright enough for a dark room and offers decent color accuracy for most games, but it's not a 144Hz panel. In practice, that means you'll see a frame rate cap around 60 frames per second in most titles, which is fine for casual or single-player experiences but might feel limiting for competitive shooters where every millisecond matters. The touch functionality is a nice extra. Being able to scroll through an inventory or map with a tap feels natural, but it doesn't replace a dedicated gaming mouse for precision aiming. Performance-wise, the i7-1355U paired with 32 GB of RAM feels surprisingly competent. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the laptop maintained an average of 58 frames per second at medium settings, with occasional dips when walking through dense foliage. When I pushed Fortnite to epic settings, the frame rate hovered around 55 frames per second, which is respectable for a useries processor. The integrated Intel Iris Xe graphics can't compete with a discrete RTX card, no doubt about that, but the extra RAM helps the system keep textures loaded and reduces stutter during scene changes. For titles that aren't GPU-heavy strategy games, indie titles, or older AAA releases, the experience is smooth enough that you won't feel you're compromising on fun. Thermals are where the HP's design shows its practical limits. The chassis uses a thin aluminum plastic hybrid, and under heavy load the fans spin up noticeably. In a 3-hour marathon of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I recorded fan speeds peaking at 5,800 revolutions per minute, and the laptop's surface temperature rose to roughly 45 C, 113 F, on the keyboard deck. That's warm, but not unbearable, and the fan noise stayed under 45 dB, louder than a normal conversation but still tolerable with a pair of headphones. The real downside appears when you try to game in a snug environment like a couch with a blanket over the laptop. The heat buildup can trigger thermal throttling after an hour, dropping performance by about 10%. So if you expect to game for long stretches in a confined space, you'll need a cooling pad or be ready to lower graphics settings. Battery life is perhaps the most honest metric for a business laptop masquerading as a gaming device. HP advertises fast charge, and it does deliver. A 65W charger replenishes about 80% of the battery in under an hour. In real use, with Wi-Fi enabled and the screen at 50% brightness, I got roughly 5 hours of mixed workload email, a spreadsheet, and a short gaming session. When the GPU is under load, that drops to around 3 hours, which is why I'm quick to point out that this machine isn't designed for all-day unplugged gaming. But for a commuter who wants a laptop that can handle a quick Valorant match after work, the trade-off feels reasonable. Portability is respectable. The 15.6-inch chassis weighs about 4.5 pounds, 2 kilograms, which isn't featherlight but is manageable for a 15-inch screen. The inclusion of an HDMI 2.0 port means you can hook it up to an external monitor for a 144 Hz experience, effectively turning it into a desktop gaming station when you're at home. The keyboard, however, is a mixed bag. The keys have a standard travel and a soft tactile feel, which is great for typing but can feel a bit mushy for fast, rhythm-based inputs. I found myself missing the distinct clicky feedback of mechanical keys when playing rhythm games, but for most shooters and RPGs the keyboard is serviceable. Now, who should actually consider this HP model? If you're a gamer who also needs a solid workhorse, think data analyst.